Alright, so in the last video we created our HUD and added animation. Now we missed a few things that we're going to rectify in this video. First of all, we didn't animate the BG, so we need to do that as well. For now we'll remove the BG, and we will remove we imported directly from asset, which comes as an image. We're not going to use as image, we're going to use it as button. So let's do that. So we'll remove this also. We can select this, play button, delete. Okay, so the two things are button, which will be anchored to center at 150, and the size will be 200 by 200. So it's -100. Alright, and now we're gonna add this play button as the image for this. So for that we need to go to style, normal, hovered, and pressed, and for this 3 we're gonna drag the same image, and we will create another image for the background, and like we did before, we're gonna call it BG. It's not a variable, this is not a variable as well. Okay, and we're gonna call this play button like we did before, and BG is gonna be the topmost layer, so we can drag and drop it here. For color we're gonna select black. It's gonna be anchored full screen, so top margin and everything else goes to 0, and we're gonna set its opacity to start with. Let's do that in here. So in UI NM, we still have the play button animation as we did before. This time we are going to add the BG. So for render opacity will be 0, and we key that, and at around 1 we set the render opacity to 0.75, or maybe a bit lesser, 0.6, and we again press this to key that. Alright, so we have our animation working now. Let's compile and save. Now the next thing we can do is we can code this, so we don't need this pre-construct and the tick. And for the construct we're going to do a couple of things. Now construct is like when this widget is first constructed, so whatever you write here, the code, that will be as soon as the widget comes on the screen. So the first thing we do is cast it into a sequence node, and the first thing we get reference to game mode, get game mode, cast to GM, and we promote to variable game mode. So now we have a reference to, we already have it here, delete. So set game mode here. Alright, compile, save. Now the next thing we can do is to play the animation. So this UI NM, get UI NM, play animation. So it plays the animation we created. Now the third thing, to add more nodes to this, you need to press this add pin, and we get a reference to get player controller. Player controller, show mouse cursor, and we set it to true, and we set the input mode to UI only. So what that does is it stops the gameplay from having access and gives UI the control. And for widget in focus, we can say self. So get reference to a self, and now we can comment this. So get game mode, play animation, and show mouse cursor. For color, we'll select green. So that's that. Now what else? Let's connect the variables we have. So we compile, save. Now in designer view, we'll select this first. Now to connect this to any variable, we're going to connect it to the gameplay. We have three variables: score, high score, and last score. So those are going to be driven in here. So we select the score first. In the text, we select bind, create binding. Now we already have access to the game mode, so we'll drag that, get game mode, we get score, and plug this here, so that whenever the value in game mode score changes, it will reflect in the HUD score. Now the next thing we need to do is connect the other two, which is the high score. So let's do that. So what do we now? We go to text, binding, create binding, and like we did before, you can even type get game mode, and again we do the same thing, get reference to high score, and plug this in. And now for the last part, the last score, bind, create binding, get reference to game mode, get last score, and we plug it in, compile, save. So what else? Let's code the play button. So we select the play button, go down, where do we have access to this variable? All right, we need to have it as variable to have access to all these events. So we're gonna do on clicked or on pressed, either works fine. So what do we do on pressed? We'll do a couple of things. So we can have a sequence node from here. So the first thing we are going to do when play button is played is show mouse cursor off. So let's do that. Get player controller, show mouse cursor, and we set it to false. Next thing we can do is set input mode to game only, so we have gameplay going on. So that's the first part. Now the next part we can do is call do once and play the UI animation. So we get UI animation, play animation, but this time we're going to play it in reverse. So instead of the HUD coming in, it'll be HUD going out. So instead of forward, we'll change it to reverse. Now we need more pins, so we'll add more pin. Now what else can we do? We get reference to game mode. We will call in the start game. Connect this here. We'll have a short delay, let's say around 1 second, and then we play the score animation. Get score, play animation. All right, So that whole thing is when play button is clicked or pressed, and we'll have that in green. Save. Now for this to work, we need to do a few settings in gameplay as well. So right now for your end, we had start game over here, which we won't. Now we need to create a reference to HUD. In your case, this won't be here, so we'll have create widget. That widget will be HUD. We can promote to variable, and we'll call that HUD as well. So we have reference to HUD whenever we need in gameplay now. And the third thing we need to do whenever you add a widget is to add to viewport. So now we'll have the UI coming in. Compile, save, and play. And when the game starts, you have all this HUD. And when we play, and you can see the score is connected by default since we have bind that variable. Okay, it's game over. So we have the HUD coming in. In the next video, we'll have what happens when game ends and the rest of the things. So see you there.